couple of videos ago where I talked about the manual load control for the dyno, I did a baseline run on this engine. And it made 175 horsepower at 4,000 RPM and 278 foot-pounds at 2246. So I'm not done with this engine yet. I want to try some other things with it. Kind of what I'm curious about right now is what's holding it back the most in its current configuration. To me, the most obvious thing I can see is it's a 2-barrel, but I don't know how many CFM that 2-barrel flows. So is that the restriction right now, or maybe it's just got a very low duration, low lift camshaft in it, and maybe that's holding it back the most. But I won't know that until I flow test that carburetor. There's an equation that's been around for a while to get an estimate about what size carburetor you need for a given engine displacement and how fast the engine's spinning, and its volumetric efficiency. Let's take a look at that equation and see roughly how many CFM this engine would want at 4,000 RPM. Alright, so that equation that I mentioned earlier about getting an estimate about what the carburetor should flow at different RPMs and different engine sizes is CFM equals RPM times displacement divided by 3, 4, 5, 6. And then that times your volumetric efficiency. So in our case, let's look at our 302 going at 4,000 RPM. That would be 4,000 times 302 divided by 3, 4, 5, 6. And a very low performance engine like this, I'm gonna go high and call it 85% volumetric efficiency, so it's 0.8 times 0.85. So do the math on that and it comes out to 297.1 CFM. And CFM is cubic feet per minute. The next thing to do is to pull the carburetor off and get it mounted on the flow bench. The next thing I want to do is take the fuel bowl off the carburetor, and I'm going to take that off because I want to be sure that I'm not going to have gasoline going through my flow bench. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow this out and let it dry, probably in the sun for a little while. Make sure all that gasoline's out of there. Okay, so I blew that out and I let it set out in the sunlight for about an hour, and I feel confident that it's free of gasoline. Now the next thing we've got to do is get this mounted onto the flow bench. So now I need to get this carburetor set up on the top of the flow bench, and obviously it's not gonna fit like that. So what I needed to do was come up with an adapter plate for that, and what I came up with was this, and that's been 3D printed. So what I'll say about that is that one of them's blocked off, and the reason one of them's blocked off is because I'm going to flow one barrel at a time. And the reason I'm going to do that is because my flow bench right now is only going to be able to go up to about 275 CFM, and I don't know what this is going to flow, but it might be 300 plus. But if it does flow 300, I can do half of that. So at any rate, I'm going to flow just one barrel of it, and I'm not sure if that's an okay way of doing this, but it's the only way I can do it. The other thing I'm going to say about this is that, yeah, it's a 2-barrel, and generally speaking, people flow 2 barrels at 3 inches of mercury. I think my vacuum motors could pull that kind of vacuum, but I don't have a manometer set up to measure that. So I'm going to flow this like you would a 4-barrel, and I'm going to do it at 1.5 inches of mercury. I'm going to try it with that out of the way just to make sure that that wasn't causing any interference. It didn't make any difference that I could see. Remember these things? Found one laying around, and I'm going to put it on there and see if it makes any difference. Not a perfect fit on this 2-barrel, but it's more or less on there. Yeah, if it made any difference, my flow bench couldn't detect it. Well, I got at most about 84 CFM, and we'll round that. Okay, so we'll round that up to 84 CFM. That's probably about the best I could do with it. That 101 was I ran the pressure drop across the carburetor as high as I could, and it was about maybe 34 inches of water. At about 34 inches of water, I got it to about 101 CFM. But at 1.5 is the one that I'm interested in, and that's about 84. So you take that, and that's just one barrel. So you take that and multiply it by 2, and you get what, 168 CFM. So that's not very much. If you watched any of my other videos, you'll recognize the top of this carburetor at least as the one where I demonstrated the Holley reverse idle mixture screws. And I don't know, I've never seen this wagon wheel pattern on anything else. Looking at that, I can see how that would be a restriction, and how little room there is between the Venturi booster and the Venturi. I mean, it's definitely not a performance carburetor. And if anybody's interested in what the list number of it was, it's there. What I want to do next is look at those CFM numbers and back calculate what RPM this carburetor would support on that 302. So now I just want to solve that equation for RPM. Alright, so we got what? 168? We had 168 CFM combined between the two barrels together. It looks like that carburetor would start being a restriction on the engine at about 2262.